Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to take you through the kind of mindset that you should build for you to implement a core banking system, or for you to do a core banking system changeover, which means you're changing over from the old system to the new system. I've been implementing core banking systems for a long time, about 2 decades for now, and I want to share with you this experience so that you become better in your next core banking system changeover or core banking system project. So let's move on. So in this section of the video, we are going to cover the connectivity of our core banking system to other peripheral systems. We normally call them integration or channels. So we are going to discuss on integrations and channels. So let's see what we are going to cover. All right. So in this cluster, we are going to cover the integrations, also the APIs, the downstream and upstream systems also. We are going to cover this. And then the channel failures is mindsets, and also the integration issues that must be planned before day one. So the first mindset that we are looking at is integrations are not side activities. They are customer impacting channels. So this mindset is very important. Let me explain a bit. So you have your core banking system here. You have different channels. For example, you might have mobile banking, you might have internet banking, you might also have ATMs. They are all coming together. Okay. So if they are all coming together, it means they are posting into your core banking system. So during implementation of a core banking system or project, you have to make sure that integrations, they are not like side activities. It's something that you have to start from the beginning all the way up to the end, because they're going to affect customers. For example, a customer wants to do a loan application through the mobile application. They do it on their mobile application. Then the transaction is actually sent to the core banking system, CBS, to approve and also return some output, either confirmation or even statements or even balance to the customer. So they always affect the customer. So this is a very important mindset. So why does it matter? Customers, they experience the bank through channels. This day and age, most of the transactions, they are done digitally, which means through channels. So a broken interface is as damaging to trust as a broken core system. So interface must also be running. Even if the core system itself is fine, okay, the interface must be running. So what goes wrong if we ignore this particular mindset? You're going to see that a channel outage is perceived as a core banking failure. So I've seen it in one of my projects some 5 or 6 years ago when I was implementing a core banking system. There was nothing wrong with the core banking system, but the channel was failing to communicate consistently with the core banking system. But since it was just 2 weeks after go live, to the customers of the bank, they believed that what was being changed was only the core banking system and the channels were not being changed. So with that assumption, anything that was going wrong, they were attributing it to core banking system. So that is why we are saying a channel outage is perceived to be a core banking failure. So this is very important. If you ignore this, if you don't do this, if you don't apply this mindset, you are most likely going to have channel issues being related or being attributed to core banking failure. So what is the mindset from a project managers? Customer experience, okay? CBS through ATMs, the card, the mobile, internet banking, some payments like Swift, and also branch tools. So the correct mindset is to understand that the customers, they experience the core banking systems through ATMs, which are channels, through mobile, internet banking, payments, and also branch tools. So this is a very important mindset. So let us look at one scenario linked to this. The core ledger posts every transaction correctly, okay? Which means from the core, it's posting correctly. But the ATM interface is an unresolved reconciliation delay, which means there's a delay when it comes to reconciliation of ATM. Customers, they see incorrect balances at ATM for hours and assume the whole bank, not just one interface, is broken. So this is the scenario that we have. The core banking is posting transactions in the correct manner, but the ATM interface is unresolved reconciliation delays, which means what balances the customers are seeing on ATMs is not matching with what is in core banking. So to the customers, this is just the whole bank has got issues with balances. It has nothing to do with ATMs. But if you look at it, the ATMs, they're actually the ones with the balance issues, not the core banking. So what are the practical actions that you can take from here? You need to scope every channel interface, okay, with the same rigor as the core banking functionality. So there's nothing called channels business only. Business is defined in core banking system. Then the channels, as they bring in transactions from different channels, they are validated with the business in the core banking system. So you should always also have the same rigor in terms of scoping. What has to go through the channels? Does it have also a functionality to accommodate it in the core banking system? Otherwise, it will be attributed to core banking system. Yet, it's actually a channels issue. So number two, you also need to prioritize interface testing based on customer visibility impact and not just technical convenience. So this is very important. Interface testing is important. It's normally done through SIT in a core banking system implementation project. And you should have a way where the customers, they actually go through the channels, and then the users, they actually go through the channels, not the customers. And then they also go into the core banking system. They are able also to validate that the transaction which was done through the channels is actually correct. Then the third one is also you must have clear ownership on each channel readiness and they separate from the core team. This is very important. There must be a very different work stream for channels as compared to the core banking system. Why? You want to have some independence. The people who are testing from channels, they test from user perspective or customer perspective on the channel. Then those who are testing the core banking system, they're testing from the bank's user perspective. So if you try to mix the two, you might not have a comprehensive testing process. But if you keep them separate, it makes the test process very complete. So that's what is meant by this mindset. So this mindset is very important. You don't need to treat integrations as side activities. They have to be treated with the same rigor like any other core banking system activity. So let's move on to the next one. So the next mindset is API readiness must include error handling and reconciliation. Okay. So error handling and reconciliation is very important. So if your API is sending transactions to core banking system, okay, so they have to handshake. If it's sending transactions to core banking system, there must be some. If there's an error, the API should be able to recover. That's the error handling that we're talking about. It should be able to recover. It should be able to also record these errors in case you need to correct them. And there must be some reconciliation. What was done from channels? Is it 10 transactions? Is it reconciling with what was received in the core banking system? This reconciliation is very, very important. It must be done regularly. So why does it matter? An API that connects successfully but has no error handling or reconciliation will silently lose duplicate transactions the moment something goes wrong. This is very important. If an API is saying successful, yet there was an error, okay, then it means you won't be able to see some of these transactions. If it's going to duplicate, you won't be able to see some of these transactions. So that is why it matters that your API readiness must include error handling and also a reconciliation. So what goes wrong if this is ignored? If this is ignored, transactions they're going to disappear, okay, into queues, or they're going to fail silently. I've seen this in one of the projects. We actually had a check processing system, and there was no proper error handling from the vendor supplied solution. So at the end of the day, some transactions were appearing as if they were going through, yet they were not even going through. It was only after some few weeks that some bank customers, they started complaining that certain transactions, they can't see them. So if you ignore this particular mindset of API being ready for error handling, you are most likely going to have some transactions disappearing or even failing silently, and no one is able to pick. Actually, every API must have some way of logging audit information. You should know what was successful, what was wrong, and why was it wrong. So, what is the correct mindset now for the project manager? Interfaces must handle timeouts, duplicates, reversals, exceptions, and also recovery. So this is very important mindset. If ever you are dealing with any interfaces in a core banking project, they must be able to record, they must be able to handle timeouts. I've seen it with so many channels or even ATMs. They send a message to core banking. Within some milliseconds, there's a timeout, so they know the transaction was not successful. Or they should be able to pick any duplicates. You cannot send the same transaction again and again and again. That should be picked as a duplicate. If there are going to be any reversals for any reason, also there must be some way to handle all these reversals, and also some exceptions. If someone is going to bring in an invalid card as an exception to the ATM system or transaction, then it must be picked as an exception. And also there must be some recovery of some transactions. If they fail, they should be able to recover to repost, for example. So let us look at the scenario. A mobile banking API, it passes connectivity tests on the first try. In production, a network timeout causes transfer to fail silently. This is what I was talking about, which means transactions, they're not going through, but they appear to be going through. So with no error handling, okay, and also the catch, and there's no reconciliation process to detect. So this is a very important scenario. A mobile banking API passes its connectivity test on the first try. In production, a network timeout causes a transfer to fail silently on one side with no error handling to catch it and no reconciliation process to detect the mismatch. So now you can understand why this mindset is very important. Error handling and also reconciliation is very important in every API in a core banking project environment. So what are the practical actions that you have to take? You need to design, you need to test error handling, and also retry logic for every interface, not just the happy path. So every interface, you must try to make sure that it has got all these resilience activities, reversals, duplicates, exception handling, recovery, also timeouts, and so on and so forth. Then the second action is also you need to build the reconciliation checks into every interface from day one. So interface is the one which is going to interact with the bank's customers. And it is very important that those transactions are reconciled. Let me give you a good example. Say, for example, a customer is going to an ATM and they withdrew, say, $10, and that transaction has never reached the core banking system. So what it means is there's now a mismatch between what is on ATM and what is on the core banking system, or that withdrawal is never recorded. So the bank will end up losing money. So it is quite important that you also build the reconciliation for ATMs, for any channels, not just ATM. Reconciliation for any channels, for any integration or interface that you might have. Then the third one is test interface failure scenarios deliberately, not just success ones. So this is important. So when you're testing, the mindset here is when you're testing your interfaces, you need to do both tests, the positive tests and also the negative tests. So that if there's any negative test when it comes to production, you know how to handle that, or it can also be recorded as a negative test, and then you know how to correct it. So it is very important that your API readiness, okay, must include all readiness as a mindset. If you do this, I can promise you your project is going to be successful. Let's move on to the next one. So the next one is on downstream and upstream systems must be tested end to end. This is a very important mindset in core banking implementation. which means downstream, you're talking of systems that are going to benefit from the core banking. For example, let me give you, for example, a Swift interface. You do the transaction in core banking, and then the Swift message is actually passed to the Swift network from core banking. So that's a downstream system, which means it has to be tested. That Swift system has to be tested, that it can receive transactions, it can receive messages from core banking system, and then it can process it. It also needs to be tested that it can also send messages to the core banking system, and also that has to be tested end to end. Then upstream, these are interfaces which actually initiate the transactions which are going to end up in the core banking system. For example, the mobile banking system, internet banking system is an example, or the check system. They send transactions to the core banking system. The core banking system processes the transaction and is supposed also to send back feedback to confirm whether the transaction was successful or it was not successful. So all these downstream, upstream systems, they must be tested fully end to end during this implementation. So why does it matter? Testing a system in isolation proves nothing about whether it works correctly when connected to other upstream or even downstream systems. It depends on. So this is very important. You cannot just test a system in isolation. You want to see how is it going to interact with other systems. Is it also going to give you the right information? Is it also going to give you the right transactions? Is it also going to give you the right feedback or output? It could be a statement. It could be a Swift message. It could be any message that can come from the core banking system. So what goes wrong if you ignore this mindset? If you ignore this mindset, the teams, they test their components, but not the banking journey, which means you're having silos. Teams are testing on their own, but they're not testing the actual banking journey. Banking journey, it involves so many interfaces. It involves so many systems. It also involves the core banking system. So it has to be tested end to end to see how is it affecting the other components. How is it bringing out the required output? For example, what I was talking about, mobile banking user can do an international transfer, which means it comes from the mobile system to the core banking system. Core banking system creates the Swift message that goes internationally. So they have to be tested as a whole, not in isolation. So what is the correct project manager mindset? CBS or core banking system depends on finance, risk, AML, which is anti-money laundering, credit, and also payment, as well as reporting and reconciliation systems. So the mindset is to appreciate that your core banking system, it also depends on other systems like finance, credit, retail, payments, reporting, and also reconciliation systems. So if you have this mindset, it means you're looking at the integration part of it. You're looking at how these other systems are going to interact to help the system to be successful. So the scenario that we are looking at is the CBS team confirms that the side of Swift interface works perfectly in isolated testing. It's only in full end-to-end testing, okay, that the actual Swift bureau that a message formatting message is mismatched is discovered. One of the isolated testing could never have been caught. So it means when we're testing this Swift message as a scenario, Swift system, it was working very well because it was working on its own. But now when you connect with the core banking system or other systems, you start discovering issues. So that is why we are saying downstream and upstream systems must be tested end to end. So what is the practical actions that we have to take from here? You need to run true end-to-end tests across or every connected upstream and also downstream systems. This is very important. Before you even think of going live, when you're testing core banking system, make sure that you are testing these channels or interfaces end to end and confirm the results are exactly what the bank is expecting. Then number two, involve third party, okay, in joint testing, not just isolating. For example, your card networks, your switches, your bureaus, and so on and so forth. So core banking system, it has got interactions with so many peripheral systems, and they have their own different vendors supplying them. So it is quite important that when you intend to test the core banking system, you're also involving them. You have to make a call, make them ready. In my project, what I normally do is I make sure they are also even available virtually or even on site to support the testing process. Even if they don't get an issue, they get one or two. But the fact that they are also able to check how their system is performing against the core banking system, and also it will also help in the resolution of defects quickly. Then the last one, in terms of actions, is never accept isolated interface testing as equivalent to end to end. Because you find there are some who think if they test their system isolated and it's working, if there's going to be another problem, it's coming from the other system. That can only be confirmed when the two they're interconnected and then they are tested. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will help this channel to grow. It will also help this channel to produce more videos like this one. So the next or fourth mindset in this cluster is channel failure can look like CBS failure to customers. This is very important. There must be a way to isolate a channel failure and a CBS failure, so that you don't mix up and it must not appear as if the CBS is the issue. People should be able to isolate whether it's coming from the CBS or it's coming from the channel. So why does it matter? Customers, they don't distinguish between core banking system and channel they are using. When a customer goes to the ATM, they don't know whether they're using ATM only or they're using CBS or the two are connected. What they only conclude is the core banking system which was being changed is the one which is not working, because to them the ATM was working earlier. So the only change was core banking system CBS. So that's the one that is not working. So they cannot distinguish. So a channel failure is experienced and reported as a bank-wide failure. This is very important to note. Customers just say this core banking system, the new one, is not working. I've experienced it when I joined. On the first day of going live, I went to the branches. I joined one of the queues, and I was hearing some of the customers whispering that everything was okay. It was only when they changed this core banking system, even my internet banking is not working. Later on, to discover that it was a service on the internet banking that was not working. So, what goes wrong if this is ignored? If this is ignored, you find that project teams, they debate ownership, whilst customer impact grows. Which means when there's an issue, you'll find the channels guys are saying it's not a channel issue. The core banking guys are saying it's not a core banking issue. So this might result in some debates which are not even necessary sometimes, instead of resolving what is impacting the customer. So the correct mindset for project manager is customers, they do not care which component failed, okay? They see the bank as one service. This is very important. So when you go out, you cannot say my interfaces are working, but it is only the core banking that is not working. To them, it's a service from the bank. How the systems are connected, it doesn't normally bother them. So the best is to make sure that as a service, end to end, everything is working. So you test it during testing periods. Even when you go to production, you also do some sanity checks to make sure that it doesn't affect the customers the following day. Then let us look at a scenario. A customer's mobile transfer, okay, shows success, but the funds never arrive due to channel side reconciliation gap. The branch checks the core system and finds it's fine, but the customer and the bank reputation only see the new system doesn't work. This is exactly what I was saying. To the customer, they only conclude that this new system doesn't work. Whether it's something to do with the reconciliation from the channel side, to them it doesn't matter. So it is very important that you make sure this service is actually treated as a whole, okay? It must be treated as a whole. Whether it's channels, it's core banking, the interaction or the integration between the two should be treated as one. So what are the practical actions that can be taken here? You need to test full customer journey across a channel to CBS. This is quite important. If you want to test the customer journey on internet banking, you need to test it from internet banking to core banking system, then also the feedback from core banking system back to the internet banking. So this is very important. Then we also need to assign clear ownership for tracing resolution of cross-channel discrepancies. So there must be one person who is owning that transaction, whether it's from channel or from the core banking, but that person should own that specific channel so that they can coordinate. If the issue is coming from core banking system, they can coordinate from the core banking system. If the issue is coming from the if the issue is coming from the channels, they are also able to coordinate from the channels. So that is very important. Then the last action that is expected is you prepare a frontline staff to recognize and also escalate channel issues. So this is part of the end user training. You should be able to train your staff to know that if there's this specific issue, it's actually coming from the channels. If there's this specific issue, it's actually coming from the core banking system. If you don't do that, they are going to end up confusing customers because them as staff, they don't even know exactly where this issue is coming from. So their advice or their response to the customers might not also be complete. So let's move on to the next one. So the last mindset on this cluster is to understand day two integration issues. They must be planned before day one. So what normally happens when you are implementing core banking system is there are certain functionalities or requirements which the users might say, yes, I need it, but it's not something that I need in day one. I can have it in day two. Sometimes they even say in day three. So which means you're going to have two categories of requirements or functionality. The day one issues, the day two, and also maybe day three. But the mindset here is you should start planning the day two items before day one. The reason for doing that is you want to also see the effort and you want also the users or the owners of the requirements to appreciate and also even to rethink whether that specific requirement is actually day two or it's day one. Sometimes a certain functionality that is day two, that is flagged as day two, you might need it on day one, which means there's going to be a customer you're not going to be able to serve if that day two item is not actually considered. So it gives the opportunity for the users to reconsider some of these requirements as day two or day one. So why does it matter? Issues that only appear once, okay, real production volume and real usage patterns hit the system inevitable. So what does it mean? Planning for them in advance is what prevents chaos when they occur. So issues that only appear once, real production volume and real usage patterns hit the system, okay, hit the system are inevitable. So planning for them, okay, in advance is what prevents chaos. This is very important. So if you plan that a certain requirement is day two, it's better you plan for it today. In case you might require to move it from day two to day one. So what goes wrong when this is ignored, this mindset is ignored? You find backlog items become post-live surprises and operational pain. So you have put something as day two. And on day one, you find that in terms of efficiency, in terms of serving the customers, it becomes very difficult for the bank. So this is what we mean by this. So if you had planned for day two, you also have timelines to say day two is going to be, say, 3 months or 2 months after go live. So it will also reduce this operational pain that we're talking about. So what is the correct mindset for the project manager? You see, some non-critical items may move to day two, but they must be intentional and also controlled. This is what I was talking about. When you move something to day two, make sure it's intentional and controlled. Otherwise, it's a day one item which is being considered as day two, which means when you go live first with your day one items, you might even fail to serve your customers. So let us look at a scenario to this extent. Go live weekend goes smoothly. Okay, good. On Tuesday after, transaction volumes hit a level never tested, which means you're now having more transactions. And the previously unseen interface bottleneck appears with no pre-agreed plan for who owns diagnosing and also fixing day two issues. So this is one of the scenarios. Go live weekend goes smoothly. On Tuesday after, transaction volumes hit a level never tested, and previously unseen interface bottlenecks appears with no pre-agreed plan for who owns diagnosing and fixing of day two issues. So that's a scenario. So day two issues, they must be planned as early as possible. So what are the action items that can be done to this mindset? Define day two support and issue resolution before the go live, not after. Take note of this. Day two items in terms of support and issue resolution must be done before go live, not after go live. After go live, there's going to be a period of 6 to 8 weeks system stabilization. So you might not be able to come up with this plan. Then number two, action. Pre-identify likely day two risks based on volume and also on usage assumption. So day two items, as you plan, also pick the risks and also put down the assumptions. Number three, ensure integration specialists remain available and on call through the early live weeks. So when you go live early, you're going to have so many issues. So you want people to be on standby to assist, especially on day two items. If you want me to create more videos based on what we have covered in this video, you can reach out to me or you can let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.